Good evening, and welcome to the Vice Admiral Donald D. Engen Flight Jacket Night. My name is Elizabeth Wilson, and I'm the new director of the National Air and Space Society and the Wall of Honor. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of the National Air and Space Society members here in the audience tonight, because it is through your continued support with your membership contributions and Wall of Honor donations that make it possible for the museum to provide such an incredible program like the one you're going to see tonight. So I wanted to say thank you, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce the director of the museum, General Jack Daly, to introduce Captain Bean. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Liz, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to hear the society members thanked a lot tonight because they're the ones who have made this evening possible. But since Liz has arrived and taken over as the Director of Development, along with Development Associate Rachel Young, they've made significant administrative and operational improvements in the National Air and Space Society. The Society is growing larger and more involved, and it's a pleasure to see so many members here this evening and to thank you for your support. It's an honor to host the Vice Admiral Donald D. Engen Flight Jacket Night. This annual program presents exceptional speakers who exemplify our mission. Here at the museum, we commemorate the history of flight, educate and inspire people about the science and technology of aviation and space exploration. Tonight's speaker truly fits the spirit of our mission in not one, but two major ways. As the Lunar Module Pilot of Apollo-12 in 1969, Captain Alan Bean made history as the fourth man to walk on the moon. Since 1981, he's devoted himself to recording history and educating and inspiring people by painting his memories of Apollo. Tomorrow is the 40th anniversary of the launch of Apollo-12, the sixth human mission in the Apollo program and the second to land on the moon. The 40th anniversary of Apollo-11, which took place in July, along with this event tonight, inspired us to create an exhibit titled Alan Bean, Painting Apollo, First Artist on Another World. The exhibition is the largest display of Alan Bean's works to date, and we are pleased to host the show. Throughout the exhibition, works of art are complemented by extensive documentation as well as artifacts from our collection. The blending of art and technology provides museum visitors with a different perspective as well as the opportunity to stretch their imaginations. Since his retirement, Captain Bean has devoted himself full-time to painting. As an artist, he conveys experiences that no one before or since has expressed through this medium. Here's a brief video that captures the highlight of Captain Bean's career as an astronaut.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
The fourth man to set foot on the moon.
Ignition sequence start. 6,
spacecraft commander of the second Skylab mission. During his illustrious career as an aeronautical engineer, naval aviator, test pilot, and astronaut, Alan Bean has been instrumental in establishing 11 world records in aeronautics and space. Captain Bean has reached unparalleled heights, not only in aeronautics, but also in television, film, education, and the visual arts. His artwork has been featured on national and international television. He has received honorary doctorate degrees from Texas Wesleyan College and the University of Akron. And he has flown over 25 types of military aircraft. In all of Captain Bean's endeavors, he has demonstrated a profound dedication to teamwork, a focus on working towards well-defined goals, and an understanding of the importance of taking risks. Through these principles, he has proven that we truly can expand the boundaries of what we as individual human beings can accomplish. Captain Bean is living proof that through sustained effort and extraordinary dedication, human beings can go wherever we dream.
It is now my great honor to introduce Captain Alan Bean, accomplished pilot, celebrated Apollo astronaut, and a truly unique and magnificently gifted artist. Captain Bean.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Hello, fellow Earthlings. Hello, fellow people of Earth. Hello, fellow humans. Nice to be with you. Wonderful to be with you in paradise. Wonderful to be with you in the Garden of Eden. But I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I was so glad to be invited here, Jack, to this event tonight. One of the primary reasons is it gave me a chance to wear this flight jacket, who's been sitting in the closet for quite a while. I had to dust it off and look at it and put it on, and it brought back some great memories. I see many in the audience have flight jackets like this. I looked at it, brought back memories. Here's the one from Apollo 12, Conrad, Gordon, and Bean. I think about those guys all the time. I was down in Cape Kennedy last weekend because we had our 40th anniversary down there and saw Dick Gordon down there, and we talked and had a program. And, of course, Pete Conrad was killed about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, so we missed him. And he wasn't there. We thought about him and brought him back in memory, and I'm thinking of showing you some of that tonight. We'll have to take a vote in a few minutes whether we want to see it or not. But I think you will, but we'll find out. So that bring back, and then here from Skylab, I spent 59 days in the Skylab, 260 miles above the Earth. It's just exactly like the one downstairs, and brought back nice memories there. Bean, Garriott, and Lausma. Owen Garriott, a great scientist. His son was the one that flew last, paid $30 million or something like that to go up on a Russian Soyuz and be in the space station. So his son, who talked on TV quite a bit, I can remember watching him and thinking, you know, he talks just like his dad. He had some of the phrases. Owen Garrick was a very brilliant scientist. I was so glad he was on our mission because we were studying the sun and other things, and he was so much better at it. Jack Lousma, Marine. We have to have a Marine with us. And so that was wonderful, and got to see them last week, and we had a chance to talk. So I'm glad to have put this on. Brings back some great memories. Glad to be here tonight. I've been looking forward to it for a number of weeks because I knew I was going to be among kindred spirits. I go out and speak. First of all, I live in Houston, Texas now. I stayed there after the program because I needed to be where I could go look at the details of a lunar module or a command module or a spacesuit or a backpack or whatever, because I had to paint them. And the things you need to know to paint something are a lot different than you need to know to operate them. So I had to stay there. It turned out to be a good decision. I've been there. My wife Leslie and I live there with our one Lhasa dog, Lhasa Apsa, named Puff Wuff. Very important in our life. At one time we had 8 dogs. And that sounds crazy, and I think it was crazy too, but we had one dog, and then we got another, one female and male, thinking we could, you know, nature would not possibly outsmart us. Well, how wrong we were, and we ended up with 8, and so we love them, and gradually as time's gone by, well, we have one of the litter left. So we're there now. I'm usually there painting. I will be returning home Sunday, and I'll be painting all the rest of the year. I don't leave again. Usually I go away every couple of weeks to give a speech somewhere. And so there's a variety of people I talk with. I talked to some Merrill Lynch financial advisors 2 weeks ago. And so when I was talking with them, I was wondering if what I was talking about would be of very good interest to them, because I don't know many financial advisors. I probably should know more, but I didn't. And I felt like tonight was different, that things I was interested in, thought were fun and amusing or whatever else, that you would too, because all of us are, as I said, kindred spirits. We care about aviation. It means a lot to us. We think about it. We celebrate what we've been able to do in that field in the world and over the last 100 years. It's unbelievable what has happened in aviation. So I'm glad to be with you here tonight. Now we got to take a vote. Normally when I talk, my speech is about, I'm a lecturer tonight, I realize that. So it's usually about an hour. I think that's about the most to go. However, last week, Dick Gordon and I came up with some videos that we thought would be a good celebration for the 40th anniversary. And after looking at the videos and after hearing some of the responses, I thought, you know, I think the audience here would like to see the video. But it's going to make, okay? All right, okay. I wanted to know now, because it's going to make us run about 5 or 10 minutes longer. It might cut out a little of the Q&A. All right. Okay, we're going to do it. I think you're going to like it. I hope you do. I want you to remember that what I say this evening is designed and has on my mind to remind us all how great human beings can be. One of the things I am going to talk tonight, several other things about what I learned as an astronaut in the 18 years I was there at NASA. I'll tell you the number one thing and maybe 2 and 3. And so you might say to yourself, hey, I knew that already. Well, maybe you did or didn't. But I'm going to try to share that with you tonight because that's all I know. I know space, I know art. So I'm going to talk about space, trip to the moon, and talk about my art then a little bit, not very long, but we'll do it. And we'll have to keep in mind now that I'm directing this that way because we, as human beings, in this corner of the universe, we are the dreamers, we are the doers. Maybe there's some people out there around those other stars. My guess is probably. I don't think they've ever been here. You know, maybe they have. I don't have any special information. But if anybody is going to do things in our part of the universe, whether it's build this museum better, develop a new way to power cars so we don't depend on fuel, it's got to be people like us. And so I'm going to direct my thoughts there. One of the things that I have noticed over the years, working with the people in the space program, 400,000 dedicated individuals, is 400,000 people that are dedicated and want to achieve a goal can do this thing. That's not even the population of Washington, D.C. It's just hard to get all these individuals generally flying in the right direction. We did in Apollo. That was one of the great leadership accomplishments. So I'll tell you what, let's take a look. Let me get to my little controller here. Every impossible dream, and it was an impossible dream for us to go to the moon back in 1963 when I became an astronaut. They took me as an astronaut because I could fly airplanes, I could get along with other people. I was not the smartest guy around, but I was smart enough to learn what they had to teach. And so they said, let's take Bean and we'll try to teach him to fly spaceships. Okay, I came there and I thought, you know, I've never achieved an impossible dream in my life. And I'm just a pilot. But if they will teach me to fly, I can probably fly a spaceship. At least they think so. So I came there, and here is the airplane I'm flying, T-38s at that time, and up in the left-hand corner is the Johnson Space Center, where we lived for 18 years and worked with all these individuals. And I can remember when I first came there, any new job, we know there's bad news and good news, okay? The bad news first. I knew we didn't have the technology to get to the moon. Some of the materials we had, like the visor, we had glass that wouldn't stand the heat if you happened to face the sun going up to 250 degrees. If you turned away and looked down at a rock, it would start going down to minus 200. We didn't have materials. Later they invented Lexan that could take that kind of a load. But we didn't have these materials, rocket engines, that sort of thing. Okay, that's one piece of bad news. But the big piece of bad news, as far as I was concerned, was when I was in the audience and some guy was up here, a woman was like this, talking, I would say, that person isn't any smarter than me. And believe me, that was scary. Because I knew I couldn't figure out so much about a moon mission. I knew from my college calculus, knowing that the moon goes around the Earth at like 2,200 miles an hour. And the Earth and the moon go around at the sun at 66,000 miles an hour. I had no chance in the world of figuring out which way to point the rocket. Fortunately, I didn't have to. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. I didn't know how to build a rocket. I didn't know any of these things. And I said, these other people aren't any smarter than I am. I thought I was going to be surrounded by geniuses. Maybe I ran into one or two geniuses, but in general, everyone was pretty much like me. Some a little bit smarter. Buzz Aldrin, for example. Some a little bit dumber. I won't mention any of them. But in general, they were people just like us. One of the things I learned at NASA is every single human being is so much better than they know. Nobody, I would say that there probably nobody in this room, that's a broad statement, or just a few in this room, has any idea what they could do with concentrated effort for 5 years. Definitely concentrated effort for 10 or 15. We just can't know those things. We don't know those things. We can't seem to learn them. Everyone in this room can do more with your life than you ever guess. And every team can do more as a team. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. That's one of the things I learned. And so I got there and I said, okay, we'll try to figure out a way to do that. And the good news, I told you the bad news, the good news was those of us there believed that we didn't have to be anything special. We didn't have to be super smart to achieve this impossible dream. That was the good news, because we dug in, got our attitudes on right, and quit saying, I don't know if I can do this, and started saying, how do we do this? This is important. Attitude is so important. Okay, here one of the things. Let's reverse where I went to. One of the things that we had to do, for example, was I had to learn how to use a spacesuit, how to walk around on the moon. And it's 1/6 gravity. How do you practice that? We tried it underwater, it didn't work too good. We tried it on some inclined planes where there were some cables holding us. Didn't work too good. We got in the 0G airplane and didn't push over quite to 0G, but to 1/6G, it worked pretty good. All these worked pretty good, but this was a device. I remember I was the first one to try it out. It was around, and they said, we're going to pick up 5/6 of your weight, and then you can walk around, and we'll measure the BTUs you're putting out, how much water you're using, all those things. We thought it was a good idea. We'd padded the suit. They started lifting that suit up, and I can remember as they lifted it up, I thought, uh-oh, we haven't padded this thing quite right. And I like to say to myself that I was the first guy to get a space-age wedgie. So anyway, we put the thing back down, and I got out, and we talked about it, and then we had to be willing to fail, use our best intelligence and fail, and then try again. We did. Next 2 days later, I get in with new pads, still didn't work. We tried it. We even tried filling the suit with water, hoping that I would float. Well, you don't float standing up, you go to the bottom. Well, that's what I did there. We canned that idea. But eventually we got it to work as good as it would. It wasn't perfect. But all those things I just described where we tried to learn to do these things, none of them were perfect, but all together they worked well enough. And when I got to the moon and got out walking around, felt very comfortable. Felt like sort of the combination of these things. So training is never perfect. One of the things we were learning then was how to train for spaceflight. One of the reasons that we've had such great good fortune repairing the Hubble telescope and building the space station is the fact we learned how to train to do this. We do it mostly underwater now, and that you've seen the results. We would never been able to do that 10 years earlier because we didn't know how to prepare. So they came to us and they said, look, we're going to teach you what you need to know to explore the surface. We said, no problem, we know. They said, well, what do you think it is? Well, we'll get out, we'll grab a few rocks, put them in a box, we'll take a few pictures, we'll put up the flag, talk to the president, come home. They said, yeah, that's what we thought you thought. But if you're going to be an explorer, the rocks you've got to pick up have got to be the right ones. And you've got to have a reason for that. And the observations you make, what you take in a photograph, has got to be key and not forget the ones that aren't. We said, well, wait a minute. It sounds like something geologists do. And they said, yeah, we're going to make you geologists. And we said, we're not geologists. We don't care about rocks. We don't like dirt. We are airplane pilots. We like machines. They said, okay, but if you want to be an explorer, you are going to have to change your attitude. Now, it's been my discovery that's the tough part of life, changing your attitude when you don't want to. And so it took us a couple of days to finally say, you know, they're right. If we want to be explorers, we are going to have to learn what explorers do, because we don't know it. We're just pilots. So we began to go to class in geology. We began to go to labs, just like college students. We were had instructors come in from colleges all over the place. Went on field trips to Hawaii, to anywhere else that the scientists thought there were rocks and surface morphology. I didn't know the meaning of that word then. Were like the moon. We didn't know for sure, but that was their best guess. So once we quit saying we don't want to be geologists and began to say, I guess we need to learn how are we going to learn this in time, then it worked out real well. So we did become pretty good geologists. Here's more or less a final exam. Pete Conrad, that's the guy I'm going to fly to the moon with. He's flown twice before. A great astronaut. One of the lucky parts of my life, one of the great blessings of my life was getting teamed up with this guy. One, he was a natural astronaut. He was a natural pilot. He was all those things that I dreamed that I could be. That's what he was. And not only that, which is different than almost any other astronaut, he wanted to help you get to be good. And so he took me under his wing, and I didn't know much. I hadn't flown before. Dick Gordon, the third man of the crew, I'll introduce later, he had flown one flight with Pete. And he tried to help me be as good an astronaut as I could be. So that's Pete Conrad. Now, I want to show you a clip here. It's about 6 or 7 minutes long. But it's vintage Pete Conrad. And say to yourself when you're watching it, would I like to go to the moon with this guy? Does this guy have anything to teach me? Okay, run that clip.
And you got to realize at that point in time, nobody was talking about going to the moon or anything. This was the first crack at man going into space. So then we went into this Mercury selection process, which consisted of a week at the Lovelace Clinic in Albuquerque, New Mexico, followed by a week at Wright-Patterson, where they had been doing work along these lines and stress testing and so forth. But you also got to realize nobody'd been there, nobody knew what they were talking about. They were all just sort of doing things to collect data and see if you could withstand heat and could you withstand sound and vibration and so forth. And so at the Lovelace Clinic, they spent 7 days, I think it was, and our physical exams ran over 8 hours a day. Sometimes we'd have to go back in the evening. As you can imagine, in 7 days of that, they really kind of examined us pretty well from one end to the other. And I got a little, I didn't make it in Project Mercury, and I may have been my attitude or something, because I thought that, I was an engineering test pilot. I'm curious by nature, and as we got into some of these tests that they were doing, which were rather weird, never been done to me before, well, I kind of like to know why it was they were doing it. And they kind of treated me like I either, one, didn't have the intelligence to understand what it was they were doing, or more than likely the attitude I took was they weren't sure what they were getting anyhow. So I kind of needled them a little bit about it, and then I guess maybe you might say I had a bad attitude. Well, there was one guy who had a neat little machine, and I thought it was interesting. I wanted to know what it was he was trying to get at, where they put two electrodes on your elbow, and then they stuck a hypodermic needle in your hand, and this hypodermic needle right here in the muscle went off with a wire out of it that went to an oscilloscope. And then they turned the juice on, and it was low voltage, but it was 60 cycle AC and some voltage, and they were putting a shock in your nerves, and it made your hand cycle at 60 cycles. You lost control of your hand. I mean, you just sat there and fluttered open and closed. And this guy's adjusting his dials and watching all this on the oscilloscope and taking pictures. And rather painful, obviously. You get this needle in here, and guy shooting electrical juice in your arm. And I was curious. I wanted to know why he was doing it. He wouldn't tell me, And I finally got mad at the head honcho one day, and I told him they weren't looking for test pilots. They were looking for a bunch of guinea pigs, and they didn't give us credit for having any intelligence. So progressed on out to Wright-Patterson. That's where we ran into the head shrinks. And I don't think they knew what it was they were looking for either. And I sort of took everything they were doing with a grain of salt, because I was convinced they were collecting data for the sake of collecting data, and really all the things they were doing weren't going to add up to telling you whether some guy was qualified for space flight or not. Most ridiculous test was one of these tests at Wright-Patterson, where they took a bucket of ice water and they made you stick your feet in this bucket of ice water for 5 minutes. Now, that may or may not sound like a good deal, and some guys got to keep their feet in there for 5 minutes, but other people can't stand the pain, and theoretically you get over the pain level, and then you get to the numb stage, and you could keep them in there for 15 minutes. But I never could get past about 2.5 minutes. And it just got so painful in my knees, I had to quit, which you know, I didn't mind flunking the test, except I kept asking them what it was they were trying to prove, and nobody could tell me what, you know, what flying in space had to do with sticking your feet in a bucket of ice water. I just couldn't understand that. You know, I had a problem with those guys there, and I've always had the feeling that they wrote me up medically as psychologically unadapted for long-duration spaceflight because I gave them a hard time. You know, and then they had another standard shrink test. They got 10 cards, and they're about 8 by 10. 9 of them have pictures on them. And they're terrible pictures. I mean, they're morbid pictures. They're scenes. And you look at these pictures, and you're supposed to tell this guy what you see in this scene. And I remember this one, you know, typical. So the guy just looked like he was starving to death. You know, his ribs are sticking out, his clothes are all moth-eaten, and he's plowing a field that obviously had had a drop of rain for a year with a mule that looks like it's starving to death with one of these old hand-driven plows. And there's a tree that hardly has any leaves left on it, and there's this poor woman, obviously his wife, emaciated looking, except she's obviously 8.5 months pregnant, and she's sitting there looking like death warmed over, you know. And so obviously they want you to tell you some morbid tale. And I was saying, look at this guy, he's out plowing the field, and he loves to work, and he's got his animal that he loves, and that woman's looking forward to having her 13th child and can't wait and everything. And you know, I just couldn't help pull her leg, okay? And this head shrinker's not buying all this, obviously, but he's taking his notes. And then finally we get all the way down to the 10th card. And it's a blank card. And he says, now I'm going to hand you this blank card, and I want you to look at it, and you visualize a story and tell me. And I said, thank you very much, doctor. He handed it to me upside down. And that did it. And that was history.
Well, that's the guy I got to go to the moon with. And I said, I feel blessed about it to this day. I think of Pete every single day, and Dick. What a great astronaut he was, and what a great mentor he was. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But here's our crew, Pete Conrad, Dick Gordon, who had flown once with Pete, and then me. And they needed someone to stay in the command module at that time that had experience. And so Dick Gordon was the second senior guy in the crew, so that was his job. And so even though I was the new guy, I really got the plum and got to go to the moon with Pete. Hopefully he could keep me out of trouble. So that was the plan. There we are. At that time, Chevrolet said, you know, these guys are getting their pictures in the paper all the time. Maybe if we loaned them some cars, they would get the cars in the picture too. Now we thought that was a good deal. So they'd come when new models came out. I think it's about this time of year. I don't even remember. But they'd come up and they'd say, well, Al, what kind of car do you want this year? Because you didn't own them. It was like you were an executive and you drove it for a year and they paid insurance. It was a good deal, boy. Wish it was still going on. But anyway, they did. I'd say, well, I had a red Corvette last year, and you know, when you're training to go to the moon and you're a pilot, Corvettes look pretty good. And so I said, well, I had a red one last year. I think I'll take a blue one this year or something. And they also then would go to my wife and say, what kind of car do you want? Well, she had always wanted a yellow convertible in high school, so one year she got a yellow convertible, and next year she got a green station wagon. It was great. It was wonderful. But anyhow, here we are. When we got assigned as a crew, we got our cars all painted the same, and I had the best job in the world, I thought, and training every day in the simulators to go to the moon, trying to figure out how to do it. So it was wonderful, and working with Pete and Dick was one of the super good blessings of the whole thing. Well, we were all training to fly the first mission, because we didn't know whether we would get to the Sea of Tranquility the first attempt, which was July with Apollo 11, or they wouldn't make it. Even Neil Armstrong felt like he had a 90% chance of getting back alive, but he only had a 50% chance of actually making the landing successfully. So that was kind of how I felt about it. There weren't any facts about this, as how you feel from doing these kind of jobs for a while. So we didn't know. So we're all training to do that. So off they go. Here's Apollo 11 in July. As we know, off they went. And lo and behold, there's Buzz on the moon. I remember watching him. It was amazing to me because he lived right behind my house, you know. And my daughter, who's here tonight, my son Clay, they used to go over there. He had a swimming pool. We didn't. We'd go over there and swim. And all of a sudden, here's Buzz Aldrin on the moon. Neil Armstrong was my office mate. He and I was here, and he had an office there, and same secretary. And so just seeing those guys running around up there was just, I could hardly believe it. Now, the reason here's a painting of mine. This is one I did for Al Newhart, the founder of USA Today newspapers, and it was for his office over across the Potomac there in Arlington. And when the kind of curved building was the USA building, I went over there and measured his office and built that painting using engineering information so that when he sat at his desk, it would be as if his desk was that far from the wall, actually from Neil and Buzz putting up the flag. So when he sat there, as he looked at Neil and Buzz, that's how they would have looked if his desk had been on the moon at the same distance, same way with the lunar module. So that was a painting that I did. I'll say more about it, but that's why I left the space program. As I looked around the office, I was training. I'd flown Skylab after that, been the backup on the Russian mission. And then I looked around. I was training as a shuttle commander. I loved the job. I liked doing it. But I looked around and said, you know, there's a lot of young men and women that can do this job as good as I can or better. But I'm the only one of the 12 guys that cared anything about art. It was my hobby. And I said, maybe if I could learn to paint well enough, I could do something that wouldn't get done otherwise. I could tell stories. I could show pictures that weren't in, some of which weren't in the Hasselblad photos or weren't in the 16-millimeter photos. So it was a big decision, and that's why I left. I said, that's my duty. I've been given this great gift of being part of Apollo, and I need to leave here and do this job. NASA's never missed me a single day, and I have enjoyed being an artist. It's different, but I've liked it just as much, and I hope that when I'm gone someday that these paintings stick around as one of the great accomplishments of human beings. This landing of Neil on the moon is the same order of magnitude, maybe more or less, I don't even know, as Magellan going around the Earth. The same thing is Columbus coming over here. This moment in history, which us taxpayers paid for, is one of the great moments in history. A couple hundred years from now, they're going to remember the 20th century as unleashing the atom and human beings leaving the Earth and landing on another body. So that's why I left. That's what I do. I'll say a little bit more about that. But that's kind of the way it went. They come back to Earth. We're celebrating and loving it. They come over to us and they say, hey, we say to them, we're ready to go. We thought we were going to Sea of Tranquility. They said, well, you're not going back there. NASA's job by Congress is to advance the technology of space, our ability in space. Well, what do you want us to do? Well, we're going to send you to a place on the moon in the ocean of storms where that Surveyor's spacecraft landed 33 months earlier. We said, okay, we can do that. They said, however, we do know, because of tracking, not because of flying, but tracking and mission control and all that we are landed maybe 4 miles away from where we wanted Neil to land. We're not sure even yet. It's either there, and then from tracking, and then from their own computer, it said there was 4 miles different, and then when they tracked him from the Columbia, Mike Collins, it was a different spot. We don't know where he went. We can't do that. In future missions, we've got to land near crevasses, big craters, mountains. We've got to make a pinpoint landing, so you guys are charged with mission control and Grumman and MIT to figure out how to make this landing. Well, we said, wait a minute. You mean we've been working for 8 years to make a landing? The minute we make it, 2 months later, we're going to do a lot better? Notice the attitude. We all had it. We said, we can't do that. We did the best we could. We've been working on this thing full time, everybody. All you can do it, we're going to give you 4 months. Okay, this is where leadership comes in. We didn't know. I was a young man then, 39 or so. I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't know how great teams could be. I did not know how great humans could be, how much more we could do than we thought. So they came to us. It took us a couple of days to quit saying, we can't do this, and start saying, how are we going to do this? And we started working with mission control. We started working, and just like you said, because our leaders felt that we could do this. They knew that they had a team of people here, mission control as astronauts and in the manufacturing area that build the space could do this. So we started working. Okay, after a month, we tried a number of things. None of them worked. The best ideas we had didn't work because we got in the simulator and tried them, and we didn't land any better. Okay? Then we sat down. All this is kind of iterative. We came up with some other good ideas. Okay? Mostly from mission control, mostly from the orbital mechanics guys, not from us so much. But another month passes. We still can't land any better. Okay? Finally, some guy at the back of the room in a meeting I was in, he said, look, we can't land there because we can't track you and know where you are when you come out from behind the moon. We're going to have to arrange this so that the Earth is turned, time your landing so the Earth is turned, and we can track you with 2 deep space antennas. There's 3 on Earth, Goldstone, California, and Australia, and Spain. We've got to make it time so that 2 of those, we're going to make it Australia and Goldstone. They'll track you, then they'll take that information and Doppler it, then we'll uplink that to your computer and make a correction to from where we thought you were when you came out from behind the moon to where we know you are now. Boy, the room erupted into, we can't do that. We don't have any way to bring in 2 pieces of data, says Mission Control. We can only bring in 1. And also Mission Control says, we don't know how to Doppler stuff. We don't have that equipment. Not only that, even if we did, we'd have to convert that information to an uplink of some kind, and we can't do it. And meanwhile, we're talking, we don't want them uplinking us because you're talking about uplinking when our engine's burning for the descent. And we're afraid that if you put in a strange bit, we could crash into the moon or go off and never be seen again. So we all didn't like this idea. However, like most good ideas, after we thought about it a few days, we said, it's the best idea we've got. Let's try it. And our leadership once again said, okay, mission control, you can't get 2 pieces of data from different antennas. Go fix it. Get it. Change your capability till it'll do that. You can't get Doppler? Get some new computers and make it work. In other words, I know you can't do it now, or we've done it earlier. Do it now. Okay, it's like, well, maybe we can do it. They came to us and they said, look, you don't want them uplinking you when your engine's burning for a descent. We understand. But you get together with them and figure out a way so you don't have a problem. You'd have a problem today. MIT, who said, by the way, we made the software so nobody could uplink it because it was too dangerous. You go back and change it and make it so you can do it. And you guys get together and find a way to make it work. Okay, we did. And I can remember as we went to the moon, by the way, in the simulations the last month, we were landing pretty close to where we planned, where they wanted us to. Because we had to be within walking distance of this surveyor if we were going to cut parts off of it. Anyhow, we said, okay, where should we target to? Let's target to the middle of that crater, Surveyor Crater, 656 feet in diameter. We're going to target to the middle. Because we're not going to be perfect, I know. And that way we're close enough so that we can fly in that direction and land near it and then get over there and do the job. That was the strategy. Okay? That was the thinking about how we're going to do this. And I can remember that was the number 1 thought that Pete and I had when we were getting into the lunar module. Can mission control get this real data, not in simulations, but get it and put it in our computer and make it work? So what I've got now is a little video of, just a minute, let me think for a second. Let me think of where I wanted to put this in. No, I can't put, I'm not going to put this in yet. I have to be careful. I've never done this, but put these in the middle, and it doesn't go there. Let's go back to where we were. Okay? So we trained so that when we went over Surveyor, we could cut off the camera. That's me on the left holding the camera. Pete's on the right. He's going to cut it off with bolt cutters. That's the plan, if we can land there. Now, let me tell you, I know I'm talking a little bit long before we get to the moon, but I think you'll like it. There are Pete and I working together, okay? I'm going to tell you now the number one thing I learned in 18 years as an astronaut. Okay, Pete Conrad and I are there. We've just finished making a landing in the simulator, and they took them about 20 minutes to recycle using mission control in other places. They're recycling. I'm talking to Pete, and I'm thinking, I'm standing right here on this side of the lunar module. He's standing over there, and I'm saying, Pete, that briefing we had this morning? That guy, mission specialist, I said, he knows his stuff. But I said, he just doesn't think like we do. He's got a convoluted way of explaining things. I just don't think he ought to be on our team. I don't think he's a good team member. And so I look over at Pete, and I think he's going to say, you're right, Bean, let's see if we can change him out with somebody else that thinks more like we do. And I'm looking over there, and he says, well, Beano, maybe it's you that's not the good team member. All right, think about if your boss said to you, well, Bill, you're not a good team member. How would that make you feel? Okay? I felt the same way. I was shocked. And I thought, gee, I wish there were another space program I could join, because obviously this one doesn't care anything about me. It doesn't appreciate me. Thank God there wasn't another space program. Anyway, I said, I sure do. He says, you don't even know the first rule of being a good team member. I said, sure I do. He said, what is it? I said, well, you got to be loyal to the leader. He said, that's not it. You got to stay focused on the goals. That's not it. I don't even remember. I was so embarrassed and mad about this, I couldn't even hardly think. And I said, well, I guess I don't. What is it? He said, first of all, it's going to take 400,000 of us to get to the moon. And it can't be 400,000 Albeans. I said, I know that. He says, well, it can't be 400,000 Pete Conrads either. I said, well, okay. He said, we need 400,000 people that are as dedicated as we are, but think about things differently than we do. I said, well, okay. I said, what's that got to do? What's the first rule of being a good team member? He said, you've got to find a way to care and admire the other members of your team. I said, you're crazy. I said, we were in this meeting this morning. I said, maybe there were 50 people there, 10% or 15%. They speak up. I know who they are. I admire them. I think they're really sharp. Okay? Another maybe 50 or 60%. They don't say much. They're in there. I don't even know their names. And I said, there's 5% in every doggone meeting that I don't admire. And they're the people that bring up these things at the end of the meeting, have nothing to do with what we were talking about. It's some issue that they should have brought it up 30 minutes ago, and now the meeting is going to go long, and I don't admire them. He said, that's your problem. You don't admire all the members of the team. Well, I didn't believe him, and I was insulted, and we had strained relations for several days. But I knew he was a lot smarter about these things than I was. And I began to think about the astronauts in the office that were smarter than I was, at least in getting their ideas implemented, and got along with people better. And I began to think, and one of them that hits my mind, Jim McDivitt from Apollo-9, great astronaut. And I can remember, at meetings, when I'd be thinking, let's get out of here, it's 4 o'clock. He'd be talking with great respect and knew the names to these guys or gals that would bring up these issues at the end. And I began to think, maybe Pete is right. Maybe this is a problem I've got and didn't know it. So I began to try to change. It's hard to change. Particularly something like this. But I began to try. And I found out, I tried to learn the names. I tried to find a way to admire. And if I didn't admire some guy and couldn't find a way, I'd take him to lunch. And I found out if I took him to lunch, then I got to know him. And I admired him because everyone was dedicated. Everyone was thinking this way. Now, that sounds funny that would be the most important thing I learned in 18 years there. But I'll tell you this, I use that every single day of my life. If I'm home and I'm brushing my teeth and I say to myself, Leslie didn't take that package to the post office this morning, I'll say to myself, I'm not being respectful of my number one teammate. And I quit thinking about it right then, and I say, boy, she made a great meal last night. So you have to find a way, in my opinion, to be selective and pick out the things that are good. My daughter's up there. She and I get along great. I respect her. Everything, same with grandkids. They're not perfect, but in my mind, they are perfect because I think about what's great about them, and I don't think about any other thoughts that I might have. Let's go on. It has nothing to do, nothing. Okay, here we are. We're getting ready to launch. It's November the 14th, tomorrow, 40 years ago. We're standing right here, ready to go. We're loaded in there. Let's run this video of the launch. Remember, we got hit by lightning in about 36 seconds, and nobody had ever imagined that spacecrafts would get hit by lightning. We'd never practiced it. We didn't know anything about it. This was a whole new ball game. We launched into this weather, I think, a lot because if you delayed too long, and it definitely would with the weather, you had to cycle a whole month because everything was keyed to the lighting at the landing site. Also, the president was there. So there's another thing that forced it, kind of like in Challenger, if you remember. Okay, so go ahead, let's run this little clip. You'll hear Dick and Pete mostly here. I narrated a little bit.
Reports that your program is in. Tower clear. The 50-year-old program and this baby is really going.
We launched Apollo 12, and about 30 seconds into the mission, we got hit by lightning. And we never practiced that. No one imagined that could happen in space. And it lit up more caution warning lights than had ever been on any space flight before since. I mean, there was nothing close to this. And they all came on, and Pete started reading them off. And he read almost every light up there, particularly anything that had to do with the electrical system.
Yeah, I don't know what happened here. We had everything in the world drop out. I'm not sure we get hit by lightning. Fuel cell lights and AC bus lights. Fuel cell disconnect. AC bus overload 1 and 2. Main bus A and B out.
When the lightning hit, it more or less knocked everything out.
This is the flight director of our mission.
But luckily, the booster wasn't affected, so the big Saturn V kept pushing and getting us up higher, and I thought we might have to abort, but there was no reason to rush into it because we were gaining altitude, which was a safer condition.
The curious thing about it is Dick, who normally gives me good advice, he leaned over, he lit a few lights, and I'm thinking, maybe he'll tell me what to do. He didn't tell me a doggone thing. He went back and started talking to Pete, and so I was sitting over still not knowing what to do. Fortunately, the ground had a good idea of what had happened. They'd observed it, and they made some suggestions.
Houston, try FCE to auxiliary, over. Try FCE to auxiliary. FCE to auxiliary. Try the buses. Get the buses back on the line. Okay, we're all organized again, Jay. We've had a couple of cardiac arrests down here too, Pete. Hang on. 41. Come on, there it is. That's it, that's it.
You get 3 good shots, bang, 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 fore aft, you know, and then first thing you know is you're headed towards the instrument panel, and the next thing you know you're rocketed back in your seat, and then towards the instrument panel, back in the seat. Does that about 3 times, 3 quick cycles. Debris is flying all around outside you, and if you happen to be looking up, you'll see you'll see the flash of the explosive as it goes off, and pieces and bits going in every direction, and it's kind of interesting. It gets your attention.
That's what it looks like leaving the Earth. And it looked to me like we weren't leaving, but the Earth was going away. And like I told you, the velocities of the Earth and the Moon and all that, I knew that we were going to be gone 10 days. And so I knew that the computers in mission control had to know where we then fired ourselves when we came out behind the Moon to a point in space the Earth was going to be 10 days later. So if we didn't have mission control and all those individuals there that could do this job, we would not be able to get back to Earth. So it was a team operation. You had to have faith in those individuals. You had to believe that they would do their job. Now, most of the paintings images from now are paintings from mine. I told you why I left the space program. This is what the Earth looked like as we went down to land. Up there, just coming over the horizon, is Australia. We saw there it was, and then down in the dark is California. So, in fact, we had those two sites tracking us, and in fact, they did do what they were supposed to do, uplink to our computer. We let them in, did the check, and when we inserted into the computer, I felt the rockets on the outside that held our attitude fire, and it put us in a new attitude. So it made a correction. And let's go along with the landing and see how the rest of the landing went. Go ahead.
Stand by for P-64. Okay. I'm trying to cheat and look out there. I think I see my crater. Hey, baby. I'm not sure. Coming through 7.
I read from the computer system of numbers, which you could look through some marks on the window with and see where, if we didn't touch it, where it was actually going to land. He looked through the window and we would land right in the center of surveyor clear, just where we were targeted.
Hey, there it is. There it is. Oh my God, right down the middle of the road. Outstanding. 42 degrees, Pete. Hey, it's targeted right to the center of the crater. Look out there. I can't believe it. Amazing. Fantastic. 42 degrees, dude. Just keep slide it in. Coming down at about 99 feet a second. You're looking good. Okay, now go for landing. Over 1. Okay, Roger. 40 degrees, LPD, Pete. 40 degrees. Fantastic. I can't believe it.
Getting to land. That's the
36 degrees. You're 12.
shortest flight time in the world, that 1 minute and 30 seconds or less, whatever it was you had on the stick. That's the only time you feel it. And I really did have to fly it. That where we were supposed to land was not suitable. It had big boulders in it. I had to fly it a little bit further around.
Hey, you're really maneuvering around. Yeah. Come on down, dude. Okay. 10% fuel. 200 feet. Coming down at 3. Come on down. Okay. 180 feet. 9%. You're looking good. Gonna get some dust before long. 96 feet, coming down at 6. Slow down the descent rate. 80 feet, coming down at 4. You're looking good. 50 feet, coming down. Watch for the dust. 40 coming down at 2. Looking good. Watch for that. Coming down at 2 feet. You got plenty of gas, dude. Hang in there. 30 seconds. 18 feet, coming down at 2. He's got it made. Come on in there. 24 feet. Contact light. Roger, copy contact.
Nice job by Pete Conrad. I knew that if anybody could do that job, he could do it. Neil could do it. Pete could do it. And it turned out the training we had allowed every landing to be successful. We had in the struts of the lunar module out there kind of honeycomb, so you could land hard and crush the honeycomb. Not a single landing crushed any honeycomb because everybody was skilled enough to make these landings. So they picked the right people to do the job. Pete was a wonderful pilot. And here I am, my first step. Now, when I became an astronaut, after a year of training, they gave me a little silver pin that was a star, like 3 rays on it, like a shooting star with an orbit around it. And I wore it on my lapel of my coat. And so I had that in that left pocket there on my thigh. And the first thing I did after I got my balance was go over to the crater right behind us. That's where Surveyor is, we think. We couldn't see it when we landed. It was still in the dark. And the first thing I did was take that little pin. This is a painting of me throwing the pin. You can see it up there, the star and the rays, and threw that as far as I could towards Surveyor. Now, when I'm looking at the moon at night, it's particularly when it's a full moon, I look up there and I find the equator, depending on what time of night where the equator is. I find it, and then I look over about 30 degrees west. Now, that crater can't even be seen, it's too small with the greatest telescopes on Earth. But I think about that thing, and I think about that little pin up there. And I think, you know, without any atmosphere up there, it's just as shiny as the day I threw it. And I think it's going to be up there for billions of years, just as shiny, until some tourist goes up there someday, picks it and brings it up back to Earth. Now, when you fly above 50 miles, you become a flight astronaut. And so you get a gold pin just like that. And this is the one I'm wearing here right now, and I had it in another pocket. And I can remember as I pulled that silver one out, I double-checked that I wasn't throwing my gold one away. But these are stories that here I am running along the moon. Someday they'll hold the Olympics up there. Now, they won't do it in suits like this. They'll have it in big domes. We could take up a dome that's almost this big right now, inflatable dome, and pressurize it. Someday, maybe 10, 50, 60, 100, I don't even know. No one knows the future. They'll take a dome up there, connect them, and as big as the Superdome. When they do, someday they'll have the Olympics up there. And if I'd told these people in 776, which BC, that was the first Olympics, that someday they would have Olympics across the ocean, and they would have them in Rio de Janeiro, or maybe have them in Denver or China or something, they didn't know anything about that. At that time, they just thought the world was a very little place. So we tend to think that too. But someday it's going to be fun when they do that. Running marathons won't be that big a deal, because it's easy to go for a long time when you weigh less, but high jump and pole vault, they are going to be unbelievable fun. And I can remember running along, and I had to look down because I couldn't afford to turn my ankle on a rock like that, or step in a crater, which were all around, littler and big ones. And you never got close to a crater like in the background there, because these things are 3.5 billion years old, and you have no idea whether you would have to get 1 inch from the edge before it would slough away, or 10 feet. But if it ever did, and you slipped down in there, you'd be there forever. So we didn't get close to it. On Apollo 16, they visited the deepest crater that we would visit in the Apollo program. And the people on Earth were trying to get John Young to go over and look in. And I was laughing to myself. And when he got back, I said, "What'd you do?" He didn't go over and look in. He said, "I wasn't about to go over near the edge of that crater." And he said, "Don't the bottom of all craters look pretty much the same?" I said, "Yeah, I wasn't going over there either." Here I am carrying out experiments, ALCEP. It was a nuclear power plant. We set out up there, and in 6 experiments, magnetometers, seismometers, all that stuff. You've probably got a set here, Jack, somewhere in the museum. But we deployed those, and still could be powered. It's been turned off because the data is repetitive, but it's still up there. It could be powered, could work, because the half-life is 79 years or something. I've forgotten. But whatever it is, here I am. The reason Pete's showing me where we're to lay it out, I get home, and I see this in the supermarket. Okay, there's a picture of me with that same thing, except they put this bones here. Now, to show what people in tabloids know, they say dinosaur bones. Well, that's not a dinosaur, that's a whale. You can see the spine and you can see the jaw. But I guess the guy that wrote this up didn't know it. Well, we didn't see that, okay? We wanted to. All of us wanted to discover ancient civilizations. We didn't just want to find dirt and rocks. Who does? And so Pete and I talked about that before we went. And we said, "I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's take an arrowhead, and we'll take it up there, and we'll throw it at our feet. And then we'll take this camera we've got, and we'll talk to mission control. look at that mound over there, blah, 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 say something geologic, you know, and then we'll do like this, and then we'll talk about that, whatever it is over there. And then we figured about 2 months later from Capcom, he said, point that at your feet. The geologists want you to point at your feet. There's something down there. Now, thank God we didn't do it because it was a great idea, but I'll tell you this, scientists, most of them, don't have a sense of humor about something like that. Whew, thank goodness we didn't. Anyway, here we are. We got over to Surveyor. We cut off that scoop. We cut off the camera. We did everything that we were supposed to, but brought back some other parts. So we did get there. Did you see? The leaders at NASA knew we could do this even though we didn't know we were good enough. They knew the teams were good enough to figure this out, even though nobody could do it 4 months before. They said, you guys can figure this out. That's leadership. That's leadership. Al Shepard hitting that golf ball. I can remember when he did it. I was in mission control, and I thought, why is he doing that? Why isn't he collecting more rocks? He's wasting time hitting a golf ball. Okay, that's what I thought then, because that's kind of how I thought at the time. Well, after he did that, I thought about it a while, and I thought, you know, human beings aren't just about collecting data. They're about having fun, doing something. And so I went to Pete. I said, why didn't we do something like that? Why didn't we hit a golf ball? We never thought about it. He said, well, we don't play golf. I said, well, okay, we don't play golf. We could have thought of something. What could we do? He said, well, we like to watch football. And I thought, boy, if we'd have taken a football up there and put the TV on it, and he had thrown me a pass, and no telling where it would have gone, and I'd have caught it, and then I'd kicked it back to him, they would have played it at every halftime in the Super Bowl because it would be so great an idea. Well, we didn't. But as an artist, there's a painting called If We Could Do It All Over Again, and the title is Are You Ready for Some Football? And so before I did this painting, I made sure that with a pressurized glove you could throw an NFL football, and we did. And then here I am running across, no telling where that football is going to go, but it would have been a great idea. Just didn't think of it. A mural that I did there in Houston, Space Center Houston, of Neil Armstrong. We were competing with the Russians. We didn't want their flag to be on the moon. We wanted to be first. We were so glad that we got there first, and of course they never got there. Their efforts weren't as good as our efforts. It's that simple. Their big rocket was even larger than the Saturn V, had failures after launch, killed a lot of people. Ours didn't. We were able, with our technology, to get to the moon and back. Now, I'm going to talk about my paintings for a few minutes. Let me see what time it is. Oh, I got to hurry. These are how I do a painting. I can't go back to the moon and pose people and get them in the right lighting and things like that. And if I were doing Western paintings or something, or I was even Van Gogh, I pose people. I'd pose the postman or something like that and see how the lighting was in paint. So what I have to do is build models. I build these little models, and the story I'm getting ready to tell here is Pete and I were on the moon. I was backing up, taking a picture, and fell back, hitting a rock in the dirt. And so I could get up and roll over. It took energy. He came over and picked me up. The first time he picked me up, he jerked me up, and I bumped into him and nearly knocked him over. So he said, okay, next time I fell down, because you did from time to time, he came over and he put out one finger. And he did like that, and he lifted me up that way. So that's the story I'm telling here. So here's the model. Here's the texture I put in the panel beforehand using my moon boots, you can see there. I used the hammer I had on the moon. I brought it back, and I'd loaned it to the Air and Space Museum. Matter of fact, in my will, it goes back to you. But I'm using it now to make this texture. So here's some texture I made. That's a hammer I had on the moon. I wasn't supposed to bring it back. So I get back, and I hand it to the guy there, and I said, he said, what's this doing? I said, well, I brought it back. He says, well, you're not supposed to. I said, well, I didn't have it on my checklist to leave it there. He said, well, you can keep it. So I kept it, and I knew it didn't belong to me. It belongs to America. But I'm using it now for a good cause, I think. I wanted to have moon dust in my paintings, but I didn't have any moon dust. I thought they'd give us a rock. But when they made a list of people that deserved little pieces of the moon rocks, it was so long that they wouldn't have had any rocks left. And people like Werner von Braun or others were a lot more instrumental and important in making a successful moon landing than we were. We got to do it and had the fun of it, but we weren't the key individuals. Not at all. So anyway, they didn't give any of them away, and so I'm sitting in my studio thinking, I wish I had moon dust. I look over at the wall, and they had given me the flag from my suit, the patch, Apollo-12, the NASA, like these, on the suit. So I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, they gave me the ones from Skylab, too. And I'm looking and comparing those with Skylab, and I'm saying, Skylab looks clean. These look dirty. I think I better clean them up. Maybe I'll wash them. And then I thought, they're dirty all right, but they're dirty with moon dust from the ocean of storms. I do, in fact, have moon dust if I'm willing to cut up these patches. And so I thought, I'm devoting the rest of my life to doing this, so I should make these as great as I can make them. So you can see I cut off the American flag and part of NASA at that time. Now the red stripes are all gone up to the blue of the stars and down like that. So I'm just hoping I can make them last as long as I'm doing the job. But that's where they come from. Here you are. You see how they're put in the paintings so that we can find them. So every one of the paintings, there's the final painting. It's titled, He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. That's a fact, boy. And so there we are, and if we looked around, we could find those. It's in the museum here. When you go in to look at it, if you do, look in the corners. I've tried to put one in a corner. There's some on my left leg and right leg there. You'll see them, because they have sharp edges where I cut them with scissors, whereas everything else is pretty well rounded. This is a book I'll be signing tonight, if we can get out of here. Just like launching from Earth, except very quiet. And the fact that it's so quiet and you can't hear, you don't know if the engine is working right, like you do in your car. You're driving along, you can hear it, and if it changed tune, you might worry about it. I can remember looking at my watch, and thinking, we had 6 minutes and 3 seconds, but we had no idea what was going on down there. We didn't have a gauge because we couldn't do anything about it anyway. So we're going to lift off, and I'm looking, and I say something like this to Pete. And I'm also comparing my watch with the timer. 3 minutes and 6 seconds to go. I wonder how the engine's doing. We didn't know. We were wondering about the engine, of course. And so finally at 6 minutes and 3 seconds, it shut down. And I can remember at that moment, I felt like we would get back home. But when we stopped on the moon, it's like stopping in the middle of a desert in your car. And you stay there for 33 hours, and then you get in and you think, I hope this thing starts. Because if it doesn't, as Pete Conrad said to me, if it doesn't start, we're going to be the first permanent monument on the moon to the U.S. space program. And I looked at him and he said, does that make you feel better? Anyway, here's what we came back in. That's what the Earth looks like. From the moon and from around the moon, it's the most beautiful thing you can see. Everything else is a star, or the moon is one gray ball of different light and dark grays. And it's the most beautiful thing. I believe myself, I'm not a religious person, but I have read the Bible and know the stories. And the stories from the Bible came usually by word of mouth till people learned to write. And I think then the Garden of Eden that was supposedly given to us, humans, was they thought was the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley area. That's because that's the Golden Crescent. That's where everybody was then. That's their whole world. So they said that's the Garden of Eden. My belief is this earth is the Garden of Eden. We are living in the Garden of Eden right now. We are living in paradise. I will tell you this. I have not complained about the weather one time since I've been home. I've not complained about people, traffic, lines at the post office. I am so glad to be on this planet and have people like you around and have animals like our dog I told you about, Puff Wolf. It's great. It's not, we don't know of that anywhere else in the universe. Maybe it's out there. I think it probably is around these distant stars somewhere on planets. But we're not there. We're here. We are blessed to be on that wonderful, beautiful place. Now let me show you what it was like for entry. Dick Gordon will be narrating this because he flew it. Go ahead, please.
As far as I'm concerned, the most spectacular part of the mission that I experienced was the re-entry and landing. I mean, that is spectacular. Coming back in at 36,000 feet per second, 25,000 miles an hour, and you are hauling the mail across the surface of the Earth.
I remember the spectacular green ionized flame pattern was 20, 30, 40, 50 miles long. I don't know how long that thing was.
When we looked down at the islands in the South Pacific, they were going by so fast it was unbelievable. And the dynamics of it is so rapid. You hit the atmosphere, and 8 minutes later the parachutes are open. So it's a very, very rapid event.
Hornet reports a sonic boom short time ago. I'm in Houston, and the blind air boss has a visual contact.
Okay, this might be a good time, if we have time, Jack, I don't know, to do a little Q&A. What's your thinking?
How about, let's take just a couple of questions and go to your last two.
Okay, good. I have 2 more slides, and that's good.
Okay. All right, who has a question? Yes, right here.
How do you feel about the discovery of significant amounts of water on the moon that they announced today?
How do you feel about the discovery of quantities of water on the moon that was announced today?
I'm happy about it, but I think it's not even important at the moment. The thing that's holding up space exploration is money. And what is occurring in this country, I believe, from talking with individuals, is people are in favor of space exploration, but they really don't want to pay for it because there's other things that are, in their minds, higher priority. And it's hard to argue about Iraq and Afghanistan, the cost, and these other things, our own economy. So that is the problem. So we can discover 100 times more water up there. Doesn't mean a thing at the moment. We've got to discover a way to get some money to go back to exploit this. So I'm glad it happened, but it's almost like, gee whiz, so what?
Yeah. Okay, over here on the side. You talked about falling and possibility of damaging the spacesuit. Was there any kind of a sealant that you had with it so where you could repair it should it be required?
No, it's a good question. We thought about all that and even evaluated some materials and sealants. And we decided 2 things. One, with that light gravity, when you fall, you don't really hit like you do on Earth. When I would start backwards falling sometimes, I could actually turn around and run under my center of gravity and not fall. Or if I did fall, I fell kind of gently. And it was not enough that I thought it would ever puncture the suit. The pressure suit is blue and underneath that white cover. So you had like a protector there. It was there for meteoroids in case they came in and hit you. But it protected you from everything else. When I would fall forward or go, these gloves had some kind of metallic called Armalon on the front, but when I would fall forward, I would just catch myself gently, then I could do like that and push up. So things are happening more slowly in that 1/6 gravity. Didn't turn out to be a problem. The way we solved it in the events you did get a hole was on the top of our backpack was a thing called oxygen purge system. And if your suit pressure started to drop, it would give you and fill a hole maybe the size of a pea that occurred in your suit for 20 minutes. And so you had to be able to get back in to the limb and repressurize if that occurred to. Of course, it never occurred. But we did all these things by statistics because we knew the size of particles flying around there. That was the big risk, the micrometeorites that might punch you. So, because it did hit the suits and visors from time to time, but they were too small. So it was done on a statistic so that you had a 0.9997 chance of nothing going wrong. So it was very well done and turned out to be good. Someday something like that will happen, and they're going to have to get back in their rover or whatever else they've got out there in time before their suit deflates. So that's the approach we used. Seemed to work.
Right here.
Learn what they're teaching you there, even if you don't like it, because you're going to need it. Teachers know you need these things later. You don't know. I didn't know. First thing I did after getting my wings was enroll in English in night school, because I didn't like English in high school and college, and I realized I needed to learn it. So you need to do that, okay? Then you need to look and see what kind of astronauts we're taking. Look at the background of the most recent selected group and that one before. Some people are like me, pilots, okay? If you want to go that route, there's one way. You look at the others. They're probably taking astronomers. They're probably taking meteorologists. They're taking doctors, things like that. Look and see what NASA needs. It's like applying at any job. You have to see what that organization needs by looking at what they're doing, who they're taking, and try to fit in. In other words, if you suddenly says, I'm going to be the greatest banker in the world and they'll take me, they're not gonna, because we're not doing anything with banking on the moon for a long, long, long time. So you need to find out who they took the last two selections and who they take next time, and see if you want to direct yourself. It's a big commitment. It's competitive. So other people feel like you, and they're busy doing that. You've got to say, am I willing to work hard enough? Am I willing to sacrifice present-day happiness, not happiness, but fun, for the long-range gathering of my dreams? So I don't know.
And another thing about that is, if you apply and don't get selected, don't give up, because there are many people who are in the astronaut corps today who had to apply 4 or 5 times to get in. So persistence is an important feature, I think, of...
You're right, and I applied the second group, the group that Pete came in, and they didn't take me. Mm-hmm. And they didn't say why. They just phoned me and said, we decided not to take you. Now, that doesn't mean whether they might look at you again, or they might say, we'll never look at that guy again, but you don't know. And so I had a choice right then to say, am I going to just go pout, or am I going to try to get qualified even though they may not take me or even look at me ever again? I made the second choice. So I began to study everything I could. I studied IQ books and things. I raised my IQ 10 points. Now, you can't really do that, I know. But if you read those books, it'll tell you things you can raise it for numbers. So this life is persistence more than anything else, don't you, Jack?
I really do.
You got to be good, but you got to be able to persist.
Okay, anybody on this? Right up here.
Of the Earth?
The
Okay,
color of the Earth, you were asking about the green as opposed to blue, or...
In the moon,
green, yellow, and the moon. Look at the edge of it that we were looking over when we looked at the Earth.
That's right.
That's where you
when I left NASA, I was mostly had the heart of a scientist astronaut. And so when I painted the moon then, like some of my early paintings, I didn't point them out, I painted it fairly gray. And then after a number of years of being an artist, I began to be able to use my artist license more, and so I might make it greenish gray or violet gray or something that was more beautiful. That's 28 years ago. I'm more of an artist now than an astronaut. So when I did that painting, I decided how I thought the moon would look and look the warmest in that sunlight. And I said, I'm going to make it yellow, because that's a good color for the moon, even though it's gray. Even though if you took a photograph it's gray, it still has a warm look. And then I want to make it more beautiful, just like Monet did, than it really was. So I put some complementary colors, violets in there, and some greens and reds and other, as much as I can, to still make it look like the moon, but even more beautiful. So I'm an artist now. That's what artists do. I used to be an engineer scientist Scientists do it the other way.
The thing about these programs that makes it tough is that they actually have to come to an end. And
Yes,
so
they
we're
do.
going to have to cut off, but we do have a
Two more,
closing,
yes.
And so we'll cut off the Q&A now, and then go to the closing, and then we'll have some instructions for you at the end.
All right, good. Thank you, Jack. Thanks for helping. It was nice for Jack to come up here. I asked him to do that because I don't hear very well. He hears better than I do. And I was afraid we'd be up here trying to get everyone to say it 2 or 3 times. So anyway, let me take a look here. So we're halfway between the Earth and the Moon. And Pete and Dick and I are looking out the window. And Pete says, hey, there's the Moon over there. It's getting smaller. There's the Earth down there. It's getting bigger. There's all these stars out there. We can see them. But even people on Earth with the very best cameras, the very best telescopes, they cannot see our command module. We are, and of course we're littler than that. We are so small in this universe that we're smaller to the universe than humans, smaller to the universe than grains of sand are to, on Earth. And I thought, they're right. We are small. We can see the universe can't see us. So I go under the couch that night and float into my little sleeping bag, and I'm saying to myself, there's something wrong. It's true, but there's something wrong with thinking that way. So I get up the next day, and I said, let's look out the window again. We're looking out the window. And I said, okay, Dick and Pete, that moon, we know where it's limited to be 10 years from now, exactly, by gravity and velocity. We know exactly where it's going to be if we had the computer program. Okay, there's the Earth. We know where it's going to be 100 years from now, 1,000. It's limited because of gravity, velocity. We know where it's going to be. Every single one of those stars that we can see out there, if we had the right computer program, we know where it's limited to be 10,000 years from now. The only thing in the universe we don't know where it's going to be even 10 years from now are human beings like us. We may be small, but as far as we know, we have been given the greatest gift in the universe. And that gift is the only limits that are placed on us, any of us here, are the ones we place on ourselves. This is a great gift. Most people don't think about it. Most people are wasting this gift. Most people don't realize that they, even though we look around, there's a lot of people here. You get out on the street, there's a lot of people. You look at TV or look at a football game or something, a lot of people. I can tell you right now, there's not a single person there that's like you. Not a single person there is like me. There's never been a person like me on this earth. There's never been a person like you on this earth. There's never will be a person like you on this earth. Period. That's it. Maybe your kids look like you a little bit, but they're not like you. You know that. You got one shot here. You're here. You've got a song to sing, maybe. Maybe you don't. Got a song to sing. You better sing it. Because if you don't, it's never been heard before, I'll guarantee you that. Think about Elton John, for example. Did anybody write and sing like he did so far? Or Elvis? I can't remember it. Do you think anybody will? No. And it's the same way with all of us. Maybe we can't entertain people like that, but we are special. But we've got to find a way to make that specialness count. I think that's the number one job that all of us have in our life. What is my song? How am I going to sing it? That is the number one job for all of us. We've got to leave here. I told you earlier, no one is giving you a test to tell what you can do in your lifetime. We've got to find a way to be as wonderful as we can be. I love to talk about Apollo. It reminds us what's great, what's the best in human beings, what's best in each of us. I told you earlier, we weren't special. We weren't geniuses. I'm not the smartest guy in this room, I'll guarantee you that. But if you will be willing to work hard and try hard and be willing to fail and then try again, persistence, like Jack was talking about, you can do it. This is wonderful. I did this painting for people that visited the Astronaut Hall of Fame because I was saying all of us can reach out, and if we're willing, and grab our very own star, whatever it is. And I'd like to make one more comment about this jacket. These jackets, these flight jackets, are not like other garments in your closet, or my closet either. These are sacred garments that we spent our lives and effort to earn. They bring back great memory. I've got a Navy one too. And when I look at it, put it on, it takes me back to the time I was a young pilot in VA 44, flying F-9 F-8s. And I look at the patch there of the Hornet on there, and I think about the people I knew there, just like I think about Owen Garrett and Jack Lousma here, and look at this. These are spiritual garments that we have earned. And so I say, keep your flight jacket, wear it, look at it, think back. We go on. I'm 77. I'm not going to be here forever, but my jacket will be, and I'm going to be looking at it and thinking about it and thinking about the time I had to earn those wings and thinking about how proud I was when I got this. Thank you for having me here tonight to put this on and think about this thing. Let me leave you with 3 wishes. Wind to thy sail, light to thy path, dreams to thy heart. Thank you very much for having me.
You got one thing wrong tonight, Alan. You really are special. This was a magnificent evening. We can't thank you enough. And we look forward to the opportunity to be out there with you in the Milestones Gallery. Captain Bean will be at the visitor's desk. He'll be signing books only tonight. He can't personalize them because of the time and the number of people involved. But would you please leave via the exit up here? We have one of them blocked, as you may have noticed, to your left. We'll meet you down in Milestones. He'll be available for autographs at that time. Thank you very much.